This morning, you turned on the light, you charged your phone, you heated and boiled some water to make your coffee or your tea, you filled your car with gas, you bought some groceries, you paid with your card. You did a lot of actions that for you might seem unrelated with each other. But today you will discover that a lot of actions that we do every single day are all linked by a simple small thread. They all go back to a small room around a small table in a room in Vienna, Austria, where 12 strong countries decide how much oil the world is going to get. In April 2016, one of those countries, actually one of the strongest members of this group, decided to just stand up and leave without prior notice, without permission. That member is actually the UAE, and today you are going to learn and understand the situation and understand why this happened. Through this story, you are also going to improve and increase your vocabulary in three main domains. You are going to learn words related to economics and geopolitics. You are going to learn a lot of linking words related to cause and effect. And finally, you are going to learn a lot of metaphors that are used every day in the English language. This is WooEnglish, your favorite channel where you will learn English the right, correct, and scientifically proven way. We teach you English using stories like the one you are going to listen to today, stories that are not fiction. They are real, they are happening every single day, and they will open your eyes about different topics related to different themes and different domains. If this is your first time discovering this channel, make sure to click that like button. And if this is not your first time, maybe you have watched some of our videos, make sure to click that like button to help support this channel. Without further ado, let's go and listen to the first chapter.
Chapter 1. The night the sky turned red. It is a Saturday, the 28th of February, 2026. In Dubai, it is early afternoon. The sun is high. The hotels are full. The airport, the busiest airport on Earth, is moving as it always moves. Tens of thousands of people. Bags, screens, coffee cups. The sound of engines rising and falling. This is normal. This is Dubai. Then the sky changes. The first sound is low, distant, like thunder from the wrong direction. Then the second sound, closer. Then the light. A man standing at a beach club near the Palm Jumeirah looks up. He sees something moving fast across the sky. Then another. Then the intercept. A flash, white and sharp, directly above him. He takes out his phone. His hands are not completely steady. "Oh my days," he says, directly above us. Iran has fired. Not at Israel, not at America, at the UAE. At the country that never wanted this war. The missiles are aimed at Al Dhafra Air Base, an American military base south of Abu Dhabi. Most are intercepted. The UAE's air defenses work fast, but intercepted does not mean gone. Debris falls. Shrapnel tears through the air above Abu Dhabi, above the Corniche, above Al Dhafra, above ordinary streets where ordinary people live. In a residential area near Zayed International Airport, a piece of metal lands. A man from Pakistan is there. He is not a soldier. He is a worker. He came to the UAE the way millions came. For a job, for a salary, for a future. He does not survive. By the end of that day and the days that follow, 3 people are dead. A Pakistani national, a Nepali national, a Bangladeshi national. None of them chose this war. None of them knew their names would become part of it. 58 others are injured. 3 men, 3 families, 3 countries waiting for news that never comes. And while the missiles are still falling, something else happens. Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest airport by international passengers, goes silent. Flight operations at DXB have been suspended until further notice. 1 sentence. Posted on social media. At 4:15 in the afternoon, thousands of passengers stop moving. They sit on the floor of terminals. They stare at screens that show no departures. They call their families. They wait. No one tells them how long. Because no one knows. In the days that follow, the attacks continue. The Burj Al Arab, the iconic sail-shaped hotel that became a symbol of what the UAE built, sustains damage. The Palm Jumeirah, the man-made island that took 10 years to construct, is struck. A fuel tank at Dubai Airport catches fire. Black smoke rises over the runway. Planes circle in holding patterns, unable to land. 30,000 flights are canceled across the region. Not in a month, in weeks. The UAE Ministry of Defense counts 6 ballistic missiles, 21 drones, in a single day. A city built on movement, standing still. Now think about what Dubai is. It is not an oil city. Not really. Abu Dhabi has the oil. Dubai has something harder to build and easier to destroy. Trust. Trust that the airport never closes. Trust that the hotels are always open. Trust that the business meeting you scheduled will happen, that the flight you booked will depart, that the city you are visiting is safe. For decades, Dubai sold that trust to the world, and for decades, the world bought it. On the 28th of February, 2026, that trust took a wound. But here is the question that no one is asking loudly enough. Why did Iran fire at the UAE? Iran said it was targeting American military bases. Al-Dhafra, Zayed International. U.S. forces stationed on Emirati soil. That is the official explanation. But for Abu Dhabi, the explanation does not matter. The missiles landed on Emirati ground. Emirati residents were hurt. Foreign workers, guests of the UAE, were killed. and the country that fired them was not a stranger. For years, the UAE had tried to build something with Iran. A careful relationship, a quiet understanding. Trade flows, open ports, a shared sea. The UAE was the only Gulf country that kept that channel open, when everyone else was closing their doors. It was, in the language of diplomacy, a bet. And on the 28th of February, 2026, the bet lost. On the 1st of March, the morning after the first strikes, the UAE closed its embassy in Tehran. 59 years of complicated, careful, calculated engagement ended in one sentence, on one morning, after one night when the sky turned red. But this is only where the story begins, because the missiles did not just damage buildings and break windows, they broke something deeper. A decision that had been building for years, quietly, in boardrooms and oil fields and meeting rooms in Vienna. A decision about oil, about power, about a machine that was built and never allowed to run. In Chapter 2, we go back, not to the night of the missiles, but to the room where the price of your energy has been decided for the last 60 years. And to the question that was waiting long before the first missile was fired: how long can a country sit at a table where the rules are made for everyone else? Chapter 2: The Room Where Prices Are Born. There is a building in Vienna. Gray stone, quiet street, no crowds outside, no cameras, just a door and a small sign. OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Every few months, the most powerful oil nations on earth walk through that door. They sit around one table and they decide quietly, without asking you, how much energy the world gets and what it costs. The room where your electricity bill is written. To understand why the UAE walked away from that room, you need to go back, not to 2026, not even to last decade. You need to go back to 1960, to a conference in Baghdad, to a moment of anger. In the 1950s, the oil under the deserts of the Middle East did not belong to the people who lived there. Not really. It was controlled by 7 giant Western companies. 7 sisters, they were called. Esso, Mobil, Gulf, Texaco, Chevron, BP, Shell. These companies drilled the oil, refined it, sold it, and decided on their own, without asking, what price to pay. The countries whose land they were drilling through. Then, in 1959 and 1960, they cut that price. Twice. Without warning, without discussion, without permission. they simply cut it and told the world, this is the new price. 5 countries said, no more. Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. They met in Baghdad in September 1960. They created OPEC. It was, at its heart, a simple idea. If we stand together, no single company can push us around. If we control how much oil reaches the market, we control the price. And for the first time in history, the countries that owned the oil had a voice in what it was worth. 7 years later, in 1967, a small desert territory on the edge of the Persian Gulf joined that voice, Abu Dhabi, the emirate that would become the UAE. At the time, it was not a wealthy nation. It was not a famous one. Oil had only been discovered there in 1954. The first exports came just a few years before joining, but the oil was real. And the invitation was open. So, Abu Dhabi joined OPEC. 4 years before the UAE even existed as a country, it joined as a believer, as a member who would follow the rules, as a country that understood the power of sitting at that table. Now, think about how the table works. OPEC's job is simple. Coordinate how much oil member countries produce so the price stays stable, so it doesn't crash, so it doesn't explode. To do this, each country receives a quota, a number, a ceiling, a maximum amount of oil it is allowed to produce each day. You can produce less. You cannot produce more. The quota is not a suggestion. It is the agreement. One number, that is your limit, every day without exception. For most of OPEC's history, the UAE accepted its number, adjusted when asked, cut when required, stayed within the ceiling. But here is what was happening underneath that ceiling. While the UAE was accepting its quota year after year, it was also doing something else. It was building. Abu Dhabi invested heavily, not just in oil fields, but in the entire machine. Pipelines, refineries, export terminals, offshore platforms, onshore drilling sites. By the time the 2026 crisis arrived, the UAE had spent approximately $150 billion, expanding its production capacity. $150 billion, not spent on hotels, not on towers of glass, on oil, on the ability to produce 4.85 million barrels a day. 4.85 million barrels. Ready, waiting, unused. And OPEC's quota? 3.4 million. The difference, 1.45 million barrels, sat idle. Every single day. Not because the oil wasn't there. Not because the machines weren't ready. Because the room in Vienna said, No. Now translate that into money. A barrel of oil at $80, which was roughly the price before the Iran war disrupted markets, means 1.45 million barrels of lost production equals $116 million every day, not in a crisis, not in a bad year, every ordinary day. But wait, if the quota system hurts everyone equally, why did it hurt the UAE most? Because not everyone follows the rules. This is the quiet truth at the center of OPEC. The agreement is clear. The compliance is not. Some members, and the names change, but the behavior doesn't, agree to the quota in Vienna, then go home and produce more. They pump above their ceiling. They sell what they are not supposed to sell. They take the money. And the countries that actually comply, that actually hold back, absorb the damage. When too much oil enters the market, prices fall. And the countries that followed the rules earn less per barrel. They obeyed. They paid for it. The UAE was one of the countries that obeyed. For years, it watched others cheat. It held back its own machine. It lost billions of dollars in revenue because it believed in the idea that had started in Baghdad in 1960. The idea that together they were stronger. But ideas do not hold forever, especially when the person next to you is quietly breaking the agreement, while you keep yours. And there was one more problem, deeper than the quota, deeper than the cheating. The UAE and Saudi Arabia, the two biggest, most disciplined members of OPEC, were beginning to pull in different directions. For decades, they had been close. Allies, neighbors, partners at the Vienna table. But by 2025, the cracks were visible. The UAE was investing in the future, in capacity, in clean energy, in a vision of its oil machine running at full power. Before, the world moved away from oil entirely. Saudi Arabia was focused on price, on keeping production managed, on the old OPEC logic. Two different strategies, one table, one quota, and then the war started. In Chapter 3, we go to the bet, the most important strategic decision the UAE made in the last 20 years. A decision that was not about oil at all. It was about Iran, about keeping the peace, about the belief that a neighbor you trade with is a neighbor who will not fire at you. It was a reasonable bet. Until it wasn't. Chapter 3. The Bet That Failed.
Now that we have listened to chapters 1 through 3, I would love to ask you a question to see how well you were following the story. The UAE joined the OPEC and actually invested a lot of money, but later it was not making as much money as it was planned. So the question is, why did the UAE stay in the OPEC while it was actually losing money for a long period of time? As you reflect on that question, maybe leave us your comment down below. And while you are scrolling to give us your opinion, make sure to click that like button. We would love to see today, this is a request, we would love to see today 10,000 likes. Let's see if we can reach that number in the likes. And without further ado, I would love to let you go and enjoy the rest of the story. Why did the UAE leave OPEC?
Every country at some point makes a bet. Not a bet with cards or numbers. A bet with years, with policy, with the quiet decision to trust. A neighbor you are not sure you can trust. The UAE made its bet with Iran somewhere around 2019, and for nearly 7 years, it looked like the right decision. A careful peace built on trade and silence. To understand the bet, you have to understand the problem. The UAE and Iran share a sea. The Persian Gulf is not a large body of water. It is narrow, shallow, warm. And both countries look at each other across it every single day. They also share something older and more painful, a territorial dispute. 3 small islands, Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb, and Abu Musa, sit in the middle of the Gulf. The UAE says they are Emirati. Iran says they are Iranian. Iran has controlled them since 1971, and neither side has blinked in over 50 years. This is the background. This is the tension that never fully disappeared. But in 2019, something changed. In May of that year, 4 oil tankers were attacked near the Emirati port of Fujairah. Holes appeared in their metal sides. No one officially claimed responsibility, but the message was clear. The waters are not safe. The UAE looked at its coastline, at its ports, at the 30 million people who lived and worked in a country built on openness and trade. And it made a calculation. A country that fights Iran becomes a target. A country that trades with Iran becomes a partner. Partners do not fire missiles at each other. So Abu Dhabi reached out, quietly, without headlines, without announcements. In October 2019, the UAE's National Security Advisor flew secretly to Tehran. The visit was not publicized, but the message was real. We want a different relationship. Not friendship, not trust, just a working peace. And Iran listened. What followed was slow and careful, like 2 people who have been in an argument for decades, learning to be in the same room again. Trade began to flow. The UAE had always been a re-export hub, a place where goods from the world passed through on their way somewhere else. And for Iran, under heavy Western sanctions, Dubai's ports were a lifeline. By the year ending March 2024, Iran imported $20.8 billion worth of goods from the UAE. Not 20 million, not 200 million, $20 billion. The UAE had become Tehran's largest source of imports, the single biggest gateway. For a country that the rest of the world was trying to isolate. The door to Iran and the UAE held the key. In May 2023, Tehran hosted the first UAE-Iran Business Council. In May 2024, the two countries held their first joint economic commission in 10 years. Ministers sitting across a table in Abu Dhabi, discussing tourism, aviation, agriculture, renewable energy. Bilateral trade reached $27 billion and was growing. Foreign ministers met. Diplomatic missions were open. The language was careful but warm. For Abu Dhabi, this was not naivety. It was strategy. The UAE is a small country, 8 to 9 million people, a tiny military compared to its neighbors. It cannot fight Iran. It cannot ignore Iran. So it chose a third option: make Iran need you. If Iran's economy depends on Emirati ports, Emirati banks, Emirati trade routes, then damaging the UAE means damaging Iran. The bet was, economic dependency creates stability. It was, by any reasonable measure, a sophisticated and intelligent strategy. But there was always a shadow over it. The same shadow that had been there since 1971. The three islands, Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb, Abu Musa. Iran never gave them up. The UAE never stopped claiming them. And underneath all the trade figures, all the ministerial handshakes, all the joint economic commissions, that dispute sat quietly, waiting. There was also something else the UAE could not control. In the years when it was building its quiet relationship with Tehran, it also hosted American military bases. Al Dhafra Air Base, Zayed International Airport. Facilities used by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, by the infrastructure of Western military power in the Gulf. The UAE wanted both things at once: peace with Iran and the security of American protection. For years, it managed to hold both. But holding two opposite things only works until it doesn't. And it stopped working on the 28th of February, 2026. When the U.S. and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. In late February 2026, Iran retaliated. Not at Israel. Not directly at America. at the countries hosting American forces, at the UAE. The missiles were aimed at Al Dhafra, at the American infrastructure on Emirati soil. That was Tehran's justification. You host our enemies. You share their guilt. And the UAE, the country that had spent 7 years making itself indispensable to Iran's economy, watched Iranian missiles fall on its land, watched debris land near its airports, watched one of its foreign workers die. In a neighborhood that had nothing to do with any war. The bilateral trade did not stop the missiles. The Joint Economic Commission did not stop the missiles. The open embassies did not stop the missiles. $27 billion of trade did not stop a single drone. The bet had a price, and the UAE paid it. 3 people were dead. 58 were injured. Dubai Airport was silent. The Palm Jumeirah was smoking. And in Abu Dhabi, the calculation changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just changed. On the 1st of March, the morning after the first strikes, the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a short statement. The embassy in Tehran was closed. 59 years of presence in that city. Gone. Diplomatic relations severed. The bet was over. But here is the thing about the UAE. It does not break and collapse. It pivots. The same country that spent 7 years building a careful peace with Iran now had a different question to ask. Not, how do we keep the peace? But, now that the constraint is gone, now that we owe nothing to anyone, what do we do with the machine we built for 30 years and were never allowed to run? In Chapter 4, the final chapter, we find out. April 28th, 2026. 2 sentences, 59 years of membership, and a machine that finally opens. Chapter 4. Free. It is a Tuesday morning, the 28th of April, 2026, exactly 2 months. After the night, the sky turned red. A statement arrives. Short, official. Released through the UAE State News Agency. It says the UAE will withdraw from OPEC and OPEC Plus, effective the 1st of May. That is 3 days away. 59 years, ended in a paragraph. The statement does not shout. It does not celebrate. It speaks the language of diplomacy. Careful, measured, formal. During our time in the organization, we made significant contributions and even greater sacrifices for the benefit of all. Then, one sentence that carries everything. However, the time has come to focus our efforts on what our national interest dictates. That is the whole story. In one sentence, national interest, not OPEC's interest, not Saudi Arabia's interest, not the cartel's collective stability. Ours. When reporters asked the UAE Energy Minister, Suhail al-Mazrouei, whether the UAE had consulted Saudi Arabia before the announcement, his answer was direct. He said the UAE did not raise the issue with any other country. This was a policy decision, made alone, announced without warning, effective in 3 days. The Saudis, who had led OPEC for decades, who had shaped every quota, every cut, every compromise, heard about it the same way everyone else did, by reading the news. After 60 years at the same table, a message, not a conversation. This was not an accident. It was a statement, not just about oil, about everything that had built up. The cheating members, the misaligned strategies, the Iranian missiles, the Saudi forces striking an Emirati shipment in Yemen in December 2025. The quiet unraveling of a Gulf alliance that had held imperfectly for decades. The announcement was short because everything that needed to be said had already happened. Now think about what this means in numbers. Before the Iran war began, the UAE was producing 3.4 million barrels a day. Its ceiling, its quota, the number Vienna had assigned. Then, the Hormuz crisis hit. Iranian threats closed the strait. Production collapsed, not because the machines stopped, but because the tankers had nowhere to go. By March 2026, UAE output had fallen to 1.9 million barrels a day, nearly half. But underneath that fallen number, the capacity was still there. 4.85 million barrels a day. Ready? Waiting. The machines built over 30 years, the wells drilled with $150 billion. The pipelines and terminals and offshore platforms, all still there. And now, for the first time since 1967, no one in Vienna could tell Abu Dhabi how much of it to use. The cage was open. ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, did not wait. Within days of the announcement, it accelerated a $55 billion investment plan for upstream and downstream projects over the next 2 years. $55 billion. In 2 years, not a new plan, an existing one, now freed from the constraint of OPEC quotas. The target, 5 million barrels a day by 2027. And beyond that, some analysts already whispered about a longer-term vision, 6 million barrels a day by 2030. Numbers that would have been impossible to speak aloud. Inside OPEC, numbers that are now simply strategy. But here is what the UAE understood, that the headlines missed. The timing was not random. Energy Minister Al-Mazrouei said it himself. The disruption caused by the Iran war created an opportune moment for the move. Think about that carefully. When the Strait of Hormuz is closed, when Iranian threats have already pushed oil prices up, when markets are already volatile, when the world is already absorbing a supply shock, one more disruption barely registers. The UAE's departure from OPEC, announced in the middle of a war, had the minimum possible impact on oil prices. Had it been announced in a calm year, a normal market, a stable Gulf, it could have sent prices crashing. The UAE chose its moment, like a company filing paperwork. During a storm, knowing the thunder will drown out the sound. Not luck, calculation. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? For OPEC, it is a wound that will not close quickly. The UAE was not a minor member. It was the third or fourth largest producer in the group. It was one of the few members. That actually followed its quota. That actually had discipline. With the UAE gone, Saudi Arabia stands more alone than ever. The last major producer. Still trying to hold the old idea together. Still trying to coordinate. Still trying to manage the price, with fewer partners and less trust. Some analysts said it plainly. The UAE's exit pulled the rug from under OPEC+, an organization that once spoke for more than 40% of global supply, now faces a future where its voice is smaller, its discipline weaker, its logic harder to defend. For oil markets globally, the long-term question is simple. When the Hormuz crisis ends, when the tankers move again, when the UAE opens its machines to full power, what happens to the price of a barrel? 1.6 million extra barrels entering the market every day. That is not a small number. That is roughly the entire daily production of several mid-sized oil nations. When that supply arrives, and it will arrive, prices will feel it. And the people who feel it first will not be the ministers in Vienna. They will be you, at the petrol station, at the supermarket, at the airport, checking the price of a ticket, and noticing quietly that something has changed. But step back from the numbers for a moment. Think about what actually happened here. A country that did not exist in 1967 joined an organization before it was even a country, stayed for 59 years, obeyed the rules when others didn't, built a machine it was not allowed to run, made peace with a neighbor it did not trust, watched that peace shatter under missile fire, And then, in a single Tuesday morning, with a statement that fit in one paragraph, walked away from all of it, not in anger, not in chaos, with calculation, with timing, with the quiet confidence of a country that knows exactly what it has built and is finally ready to use it. Today, the machine is running. Not at full power yet. The strait is still disrupted. The tankers are still navigating risk. The region is still finding its new shape. But the quota is gone. The ceiling is gone. The room in Vienna no longer has a seat with the UAE's name on it. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, Abu Dhabi will decide alone how much oil it produces, how fast it grows, how it responds to the market, how it builds its future. The bet with Iran failed. The patience with OPEC ended. The alliance with Saudi Arabia cracked. And out of all of that, a country emerged that owed nothing to anyone. The door is open, and this time, the UAE holds the key.
And with this, we come to the end of this video. The UAE decided to leave the OPEC, one of the strongest tables in the world, where the prices of almost everything gets decided whether directly or indirectly. Through this journey, you learned a lot of interesting words. Words like quota, for example, which means how much of something you can have or you can produce. Embargo, which means when a country decides to stop selling to another country as a political weapon. You learned words or adjectives like volatile, which means something unpredictable. And finally, you learned probably some Lincoln words that you can use to express cause and effect. Finally, I would love to end with this question. Do you think that the UAE made the right decision? Do you think the prices of gas, of oil, of groceries are going to go high or they are going to go down? With that, I would love to kindly remind you that if you would love to have today's story, the UAE leaves OPEC, as a PDF, you can do that for free on our website, WooEnglish.com. If you would love to be part of our great community and interact with other people like you who are very interested in learning and improving their English, you can go to our Telegram or our WhatsApp through the links in the description box. Finally, if you would love to see how much you understood from today's story, go down to the comment section and take part of the quiz that you will find pinned there. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to support this channel. Don't forget our challenge, 10,000 likes. We would love to see something crazy today with the like button. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.